Howdy. I already lost my notes. So, my name is Mike Shea. This is our second episode of the DM's Deep Dive right here on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. I said it right. This is a show that's going to be on YouTube. It's on Twitch right now live, and it's going to be a podcast as well. And we're here today to talk about the DM experiences from organized play. I'm here with a very good friend of mine, Teos Abadia. Teos and I went and looked through my email to see how long we've known each other. At least 6 years, Teos and I have been friends, and we have worked together on numerous projects. We have run into each other at many conventions, and he and I have had many conversations about organized play, including conversations we had just a few weeks ago at Winter Fantasy, which was awesome. So we're going to jump right in. So the way the show, sorry, Teos, would you like to introduce yourself? Would you like to say hello?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on, Mike. As you know, I think the world of you and of all the things you write every Monday, somehow punctually with like many blog posts lined up, ready to go. You're incredible. Your books are awesome. Everything you do is gold. So awesome.
I should have you on every show.
That's why I said that.
That would be great. Thank you. It's actually Tuesdays when there's a Monday holiday because I always want people to read while they're at work. That's a secret trick. Don't tell anybody that.
I won't.
So we also have our guardian angel, Alex Basso is on the line as well. He is invisible, but he is watching the chat channel. We're going to have a conversation for about a half an hour, Teos and I, and then we're going to answer questions that have come from the folks on Twitter, if anybody posts on Twitter, and on the Skype channel. And Alex will be giving those. Alex, can you say hello, or are you muted? Solar with his arrows of slaying, so careful. So I wanted to start off by talking to Teos about his experiences in organized play. Why I brought him on the show. So Teos, do you want to give a brief summary of your experience with organized play?
Sure. So organized play goes back way before my time, but I started in 2000 with the birth of Living Greyhawk. And that was an organized play campaign based in the world of Greyhawk, one of the Dungeons & Dragons settings. And the way I got into it is I was traveling a lot for work. So I would try to be in a home campaign. Like I would do the old go to the game store, get something off the pegboard, call them, try to be in a game, because this is pre-internet being serious. And then I would travel, and I would miss like 3 game sessions. And I'd come back, and I wouldn't even know what was happening, and everybody would be 2 levels higher. And that was terrible. So I found that this thing, organized play, I could like play module 1, and then I could show up whenever I could and find a group that was playing module 2, and it's like I never left the story, right? It was like the best thing ever. But beyond that, what was really super awesome about organized play is that I was able to be a part of this huge community with all these volunteers, and like there are people creating stuff, and I got really excited, like how do I help out? How do I make this happen? Like people are creating stuff, but on a huge scale that touches thousands of people. I want to be a part of that. And so, you know, my deep dive into organized play was with me just kind of being super excited about that volunteer aspect.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about, so I think one of the first ways that I really saw your effort in this was the Ashes of Athos campaign. You call it a campaign season
campaign
thing, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk just a little bit about that? Because I know you had a pretty big role in that.
Sure. That was an unbelievable opportunity. One of the things I swore I would never do, I swore it to my wife, to my friends, to myself, is I would never be an admin for an organized play campaign because it's insane work. And I knew it just having seen people do it for Living Greyhawk. But then I had an opportunity where someone came to me and said, would you be willing to head up this organized play campaign set in Dark Sun? And I mean, I love Dark Sun. I used to be like one of the people who ran the list server back in the Stone Age. And so, I mean, I was like, okay, I can't say no to that. And I also saw it as an opportunity to give back, right? Like all these people had done things for me, had admin campaigns for me, had written adventures, you know, now I would do it. And it was awesome. And we had a fantastic team with Derek Gooder, who runs events for Gen Con, and Chad Brown, who you can see at Lone Shark Games, who makes all kinds of amazing things. So working with those creative types and some other people who helped as well, and all the authors, that was an unbelievable experience. And we, for 3 years, created 9 adventures a year. and ended in an enormous battle interactive where people took ships into the Sea of Silt and fought a awakening primordial and prevented it, and they made choices about what would happen at every stage of the campaign, and it was unbelievably super fun.
Yeah, I remember. So my wife loves to tell this story about one of the adventures where they ended up rich. And, there was like one kind of series of events that would lead off to the point where they basically became rich. And I think the DM's like, you can do this. And your characters are retired. And they're like, we don't care. We're doing it. Like, we have water and metal.
That was a really fun part of the adventure. We when the author wrote it up, he said, he's a good friend of mine. He said, what if the players can actually keep this stuff? Like, they probably won't, but some of them will say, yeah, you know what, I'm keeping this. And then you just leave the campaign. And we're like, yeah, that's perfect. Makes great sense.
Right. It's one of those great D&D moments that, like, a video game would never let you do that, right? A video game would just put an invisible wall up between you and the loot. And this is one where not only, and you would think organized play would have that trick as well, right? Like, well, sorry, you can't just be rich. There's a formula for how much money you're allowed to have, and it was neat to see an adventure that said, nope, you don't get to ruin the game for everyone else, but you can be, you can do this.
That is fun, and one of the things that's tough in organized play when you're trying to create a unique experience is that usually whatever you're writing is going to be played many times over some time span, a year or more. And so, like, for example, people who went to a reissue of the White Plume Mountain Classic Adventure for organized play, they came out of it, if they'd been in the soul gem being kind of sucked into it, they came out white. And so you'd play, like, I didn't go to that convention. I think it was at Origins one year. But, people would show up and they're just white head to toe, every part of them, right? It's just like alabaster white. And then you'd go to another table and someone else might be that way, right? And you're like, all right, you're another person who did that. Gotcha.
Neat. So if you had to guess, about how many organized play games have you DM'd over the years?
It's hard to say, but I used to live in Greyhawk 3 times a week, right? 3 4-hour adventures a week is what my average was. I remember kind of figuring it out one time, including convention play. And a lot of that was DMing. And then for Living Forgotten Realms, I think I once figured out that I did like 400 4-hour adventures across the years there. So, like, 1,600 hours there, like more than 3,000 hours for Living Greyhawk. Then there's the Ashes of Athos. Even if you don't count the design work and stuff, it was a lot of DMing because I'd run them over and over again at conventions. 5e running stuff, play tests. And then there's all the non-D&D stuff, Living Spycraft, Shadowrun missions, Heroes of Rokugan, right? And I DM'd tons for all those campaigns and others.
So do you think it's probably safe to say you hit your 10,000 hours of DMing organized play? Yeah, for
sure. Adding in playtests and things like that, I would expect I probably have. So.
That's awesome. So that's one of the reasons we have you here, right? We want to take your head and squeeze it and get all the juices out, all that 10,000 hours of experience. We want everybody to get parts of that. So thank you for coming.
My fluids.
You better. So here on the deep dive, I like to kind of dig deep into the topic rather than sort of hit the surface level stuff. But I think it's important to, get a couple of those surface level things. So with that 10,000 hours, 10,000 hours plus of experience running and countless hours watching people run games, right? You've been with many DMs, right, and seen how they operate in organized play. What are like your first, second, third biggest takeaways that you've come away with from all of that time seeing and running all those games?
So and you're totally right. Like, that's one of the greatest benefits, is that you get to be a part of so many games and learn so much. And maybe that's just the first takeaway, is that the hobby, I never imagined back when I was playing with one DM in the 6th grade how amazingly diverse and rich the hobby can be. How many different ways you can approach it, how many things there are to learn about it, the new angles, the techniques, as a player too. But you just see, you play, and through organized play, you can play the same adventure with different DMs, or run the same adventure for different tables. And when you see how people approach these situations, it just tells you, this is a hobby that never stops giving back to you, never runs out of experiences and things to figure out, right? So that's probably my first takeaway, is just that being blown away by how rich it is. Second thing is that you can really create an amazing community when you work together. You know, with Ashes of Athos, where we would weave together this narrative and this story, and then see people feed off of that and develop more out of it. Or Living Greyhawk was, you know, amazing for that. In just the adventures would even adapt to what the players were doing, right? Because the players would make such a strong show of preferring one action over another, wanting to see the adventures go in a certain direction. So seeing that community is probably an amazing learning. As a player, one of the really big things was seeing how you can create a character that doesn't just have like a shtick, but a shtick that the table feeds off of. So like one of my friends, he played a character called Boshek of Asmecadom, and he invented this god called Asmecadom. And I say invented, we all know it's real. But Boshek would walk around with a little bag around his neck, which he called the vault of Asmecadom, and he would peer inside and ask it questions. And so basically inside was his familiar, which, you know, eventually you probably figured out maybe what it was or got it down to a couple. Of course, it's actually a god. But he would basically what you realize is his shtick was his character's being run by the creature. Right? That's who's really calling the shots and doing things. But the way he would do it, because it was sort of comical and intriguing, it so caused you to want to do things about it, right? People would want to take the bag, or they'd want to look into it, or cast a divination about it, or make, you know, just revolve around it. And so it was just that kind of character that it would excite everybody else at the table and get everybody else thinking and planning, and that was pretty awesome.
And you've seen a lot of that over the years with different. Yeah.
And he was I was in an adventuring company with him called Griffin's Wrath, and all of the people in there, I could tell stories about what their characters did and how they approached it. And so I learned from those guys, you know, just soaked it all in, right? It was amazing.
And what would you say is a third big takeaway you've had from your experience with organized play?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the third one as a player. So it's kind of like, you know, the richness of it, the community experience, and you know, kind of player side.
Gotcha. Yeah.
As a DM,
sorry, I'm squeezing for a fourth.
No, as a DM, there are countless things, countless tips. I mean, similar to how you see, you know, a player that shows you how to make an amazing experience for the table. Sometimes you like prepare a DM, prepare an adventure for a convention, but you get to play it beforehand, and you see how someone runs it, and you're like, oh, I'm going to do that. Right? Or like a table that I ran for you once was the play test for 5th edition with the Caves of Chaos.
Yeah, right.
The Caves of Chaos, if folks know, comes from the Keep on the Borderlands, very famous adventure, and it's just kind of this sandboxy, here are these caves, and you can go to any one of these holes. You know, the bottom ones, closer ones are easier, but you could really go anywhere. And so when thinking about how to playtest this and run the playtest at Winter Fantasy one year, I'm like, okay, how do I do that, right? What do I pull off here? And someone, actually, it was Chatty DM, who was in a car with Sean Merwin, and they talked about something like a box that was in one place and people have to find it. And then they maybe even came up with the actual idea that I ended up using, but something about a wedding. And
yeah, so I remember that.
So I played off that you actually are brought here not by good people, but by goblins who are complaining about the other people being riled up. And it's because there's a wedding going on between two hobgoblins, and they're kind of fighting other creatures that live in the caves to prove themselves. And so I just created this shtick. And, you know, I think at your table we had this scene where you guys walked in on the bride who's being measured by a goblin. You know, he's there with like a tape measure. Completely made up, right? But it was because of these ideas that someone else had cooked up that I could then feed off of that.
Yeah. That was I remember that because there was that great big pit of all of the different people running the same adventure, and we all had to sign NDAs to even get into the pit. Yeah. Everything was on yellow paper so that you couldn't Xerox it. And but one thing that was really, and this kind of gets into into what you were talking about, being able to like look around and see the same adventure being run by 4 or 5 different DMs at the same time, and hear the different stories that are taking place out of that one same, you know, adventure that was like 35 years old or something.
Yeah.
You know, was really interesting, and not something, you know, when we think about people who run home games, it's not typically an experience that you get running home games, is to be able to see that, you know, like you said, that same adventure run multiple times. It's really,
it's really, like a lot of times you run a home game and you're like, oh, that went pretty well, you know, but I feel like I could have done something differently. When you run an organized play at a convention, you know, run it in slot 1, and then you run it in slot 2, and then maybe in slot 5, and each one gets better, but they're usually kind of different, and you learn something each time. There was an investigative mod I ran once, and the first time was just amazing, and the second time I completely messed it up, and I really really learned from that, because I thought I should just let them figure it out without giving them a hint, and then I sort of overthought it. I started freezing and thinking like, oh man, I'm doing such a bad job of this. And but that was one tough experience, and honestly they had an okay time. But from then on I was like, okay, I know how to handle the situation.
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people do it. I imagine it's relatively rare that people run the same adventure more than once, but I've had, or within a quick succession. But now with the hardback books, I've been running the hardback books in parallel for 2 groups. So I ran Curse of Strahd with 2 groups. I ran the first part of Horde of the Dragon. I ran Horde of the Dragon Queen with 2 groups, and now I'm running Storm King's Thunder with 2 groups. And at first, my instinct was like, well, this is going to be boring. Like, I don't want to run the same material multiple times. And what I found is the differences between the 2 groups have been really interesting. And one of those groups is getting a far better outcome because I've tried it out. So it kind of rotates right? Depending on which sessions get missed and everything. So it's luckily it's not like one group's always getting the shaft. But it's been kind of interesting that running it the second time, I'm like, oh yeah, now I know how to run it. One group was a test group, the other group actually gets like a whole thing, and then sometimes it flips back. But also seeing the differences, to running 2 different Curse of Strahd games and having Strahd's relationship with the group be very different in either. Really, really interesting. So we had a question from Twitter, and I'm kind of manipulating the text to be something that I want it to be. So, but one of the questions is like, what's the best way for somebody to get started DMing an organized play, and how does somebody get over the fear of DMing for a bunch of strangers at a game shop, right? They're in an unfamiliar place, they're with unfamiliar people, potentially running unfamiliar material, and that's a pretty big leap to make for a lot of folks. What are some tricks that can help them make that leap?
So if there's a current program running, it's a lot easier, right? Because one of the things you can do is just go and play for a bit and see how it's handled. Because there's often, especially in the better managed stores, there's someone who kind of organizes it, like a lead DM, or even someone maybe doesn't DM but just kind of organize it. They might work for the store, they might be a volunteer. We have an amazing one here in Portland. She just coordinates like, I don't know, 7 or 8 tables at a time, and it's fantastic. You can actually go to the Adventures League website, and amazing woman, Lauren Belanco, I think is her last name. I met her at Gen Con one year. She runs an incredible gaming store in Brooklyn.
Jersey, right? Oh, Brooklyn, New York. Oh, God.
Yeah. And she wrote some articles on how to get started and how to run a program at a store that are on the Adventures League website. Definitely worth reading. But if there's a program, you can kind of go in and say, all right, I'm going to play and I'm going to get the feel for it. And then it's a matter of, signing up with the store and saying, I want to DM sometime, reading over the material. And usually what you're running especially at a store, is not particularly long. And so you can read over that material. You've got lots of time to look over it and then run it. If you're doing an Adventures League adventure, like the actual thing versus a chapter from one of the published books, then it's usually either 2-hour or 4 adventures. So you could start with a 2-hour adventure, a lot easier to prepare. And we can talk about prep later, but you kind of set that up. And then what I always like to keep in my mind as a DM when I'm in a new situation is people are dying to play. And the limiting resource is the DM. So you are performing a service by even being a half-warm body that showed up and let them feed off of whatever you say. If you say it in the worst way possible and run the combats poorly, they will still have a good time, right? So all you got to do is, come up from that baseline, and they'll be tickled pink. And you'll develop expertise over time, right? You don't need to be one of the YouTube stars, Matt Mercer or Chris Perkins first thing. Just take it easy and have fun, and it'll work.
Yep. Yeah. That the advice, and sometimes it gets criticism for being kind of too vague and too hippie, of relax and have fun. But in the DM survey I did, where I did all kinds of crazy space age algorithms to kind of read through 6,600 tips that people had provided. That those were two of them, right? Like relax and have fun was a very commonly referenced, and yeah, that's I think you're dead on with the idea that like no one is sitting at the table to criticize you as a DM.
No.
Right. People are there because they're spending their time, they're spending their free time because they want to go and play D&D, and it doesn't have to be the most perfect machine precise game ever. They want to watch their characters hit stuff with a sword. They want to escape from reality for a little while, and they want to laugh, right, and throw Cheetos at each other. And I mean, it's probably easy for guys like you and I to say it, right, with the with the amount of experience that we've got having run games, but it isn't, and Enrique and I talked about this in the last show a lot, right? The whole show was kind of devoted to it. But yeah, I guess that kind of remembering that everyone's there to have a good time, I think is a good empowering kind of idea to hang on to when one wants to do it.
And to speak to Enrique's show for a second, one nice thing about organized play, right? If you're a new DM for a home campaign, like you kind of have to run chapter 1 of whatever you've cooked up, hope it goes well, go on to chapter 2, kind of keep hoping it goes well, and you might not know, like, sort of how does this measure, like am I on target here? But one of the things you can do at a convention or even in a gaming store, if they're running encounters, sorry, not encounters, it's no longer a used term, but if they're running a
hardback adventure or something.
If they're running the adventures, the 4-hour, 2-hour adventures from Adventures League that you can get on the DM's Guild, if they're running those in a repetitive pattern, like we're going to run, 5-2 today, and then we're going to run it 3 days from now. So you can go play it one day and see how someone does it. Or at a convention, sign up to play it in slot 1. And then you can run it in slot 4 or 3 days from now at the gaming store. Yeah. And you've already seen how it plays. You've felt the pacing, felt how the NPCs can come to life, how the combats can be exciting or not.
Or
and
even
improve
things
upon
you change,
that.
Right?
Yeah.
If you go, I like that, but I think maybe I'm going to do this with it. Or wouldn't it have been cool? How many times we was sitting watching a movie going, if only this happened, right? And you're like, well, now I have that chance, right? Now we can make it happen.
But that's so helpful to see someone else run an adventure. Yeah. Like even, I've been running at conventions forever. And still, if I can get in on a slot 0 of an adventure or play it beforehand, it improves my DMing for sure.
Yeah, man.
Gives me yes.
So another question about kind of running organized play. Do you have any experience running organized play in Roll20 or online?
I have a little bit, and I've done more so, actually not in Roll20 specifically, but online. I used to do a ton for Living Forgotten Realms. I had a job where I was doing a lot of processing stuff, so I'd kind of hit the go button and have nothing to do till it stopped. So I would play adventures online on Map Duels for 4th edition, and that was super fun. I did a ton of that, and a couple times I ran as well.
And now organized play is now legal on Roll20, right?
Yep.
So that means somebody can go, and I'm not pimping Roll20. I'm friends with Roll20 people, and one of the owners is one of the guys who started it is at my table. So disclaimer there. But they have things, and another friend of mine, in fact, the one of the partners with Rudy Basso of the Don't Split the Podcast Network works on Roll20 material. You can buy published adventures there. You can buy the hardback adventures, and they have all the maps and everything like that, and they're AL legal. So
it's illegal online in any format. They just make it easier. Like when you and same thing with Fantasy Grounds, right? If you buy adventures on the DM's Guild, you can get the files to run them and things like that.
So, So yeah. So if people want to have that sort of organized play experience with published adventures, those are that playing online is an opportunity as well. If I think a lot of people would kind of like to get into it, but they don't have local game shops, or they can't, conventions are expensive and require a fair bit of energy and effort to get to. Yeah. I think they're worth it if you can do it, right? I mean, you and I go to a lot of conventions, and I don't think we would if we didn't think that they were, really great experiences, but certainly that's not something everyone can do.
Right. No.
So let's talk a little bit about preparation. What are some of the experiences you've picked up preparing for organized play that you also think help DMs when they're preparing in general? Aside from some of the stuff that we talked about, like watching people play it, or and actually, but before that, there's one thing I want to go back to about watching people run adventures. Another opportunity for that, and then again, Enrique, I'm just going to sit here and talk to you about what Enrique and I talked about last time, if that's okay.
Let's talk about Enrique.
Yeah, let's talk about Enrique. Great guy. So the YouTubes these days have lots of live play video of published adventures. You can go there, and I bet you can find every one of the hardbacks. I bet you could find a stream where somebody ran it. And if somebody can't get that opportunity to go to a shop and watch someone run it, which probably is a better experience, or certainly playing in it is probably a better experience, or going to a convention and watching people play it, or again, playing in it is a better experience. But again, if that's hard to do, like Greg, you can go watch Greg Bilsland, who worked at WotC, run Lost Mines of Phandelver.
Right.
And to me, it's like, and that's, again, an organized play legal adventure. So if people want to get involved in organized play, they want that experience of seeing somebody run it, which I think could be a lot better than just reading the adventure itself, and was previously not anything. We couldn't do that before. Now we can.
Right.
That's one way to do it. So besides that, what are some other tips for preparing for organized play that you think also transfer over for people running their own home games?
So I tend to go at it, I love lazy DMing.
Thank you.
Plug in your book. Everybody should check out your book. And I think that is great for home campaigns. With organized play, one of the things that happens is people are sort of signing up to have the experience. Mm-hmm. So if I take a particular adventure, it has a plot to it, it has encounters in it, and it has a duration. And people want to hit those things in that duration. And they want to feel like they came out with a true experience of it. So while you have the latitude, the adventure does, and then the program of Adventures League gives you the latitude to make changes, they want to have a representative experience. Right?
A shared experience.
Yeah, and that too, so that when you go to another table, you can say, well, I did the following thing in this adventure. Oh yeah, that was awesome, right? Like that common, it's a lingua franca that you're creating. So I'm much more organized than lazy when it comes to those adventures. What I do is I'll read over an adventure, usually while I do some exercise, like a bike or something. That's great, just like kind of just reading through it. And then I'll go back and read it again and highlight and draw in notes, underline, stat block things that matter. Spells, I hate the way 5th edition spells are, so look up intensive many times. So I'll make notes so I don't have to look anything up for spells. And sometimes a few notes about monsters. And that's just kind of the semantic stuff. So, like I've got a, binder here. It's my 3-ring binder that I'll put an adventure into. And so like this awesome adventure, Forgotten Traditions, is super dope. Written by one of the admins, Travis Woodall. And so I'll go in and I'll, make all sorts of notes and stuff. And I will, I separate it with colored dividers, and I'll make notes, which I'm not going to show too much because of spoilers, but like I've highlighted where certain things are. This adventure gives you a lot of choices as a DM, like you can use encounter A or B or C or D in a particular room. So I made my preferences there, and then in case someone has already played it, and I'll swap it out. So I'll do that kind of approach to it when I'm running an adventure, right? And that is really very helpful. The other thing I look at that I think is really critical is, you've got a limited amount of time, but you want it to feel like a personal experience. So I often want a very strong start in terms. Oh, and the other thing is I want a game that's role-playing heavy. So I want your character backstory to matter, and for you to feel like it mattered. But then I want to also encourage you to be descriptive and evocative around the role-playing scenes. So I will do something if the adventure has something that could do that, then I'll try to heighten it. If it doesn't have it, I will try to add something. So Forgotten Traditions has sort of the you get a message from this character, this NPC heading you there. So one of the things I did is I said, for character introductions, tell me where you are when you receive this note, and why that ties into who your character is. So then they kind of thought well, I guess I'm in my library because I'm, this wizard that cares about lore. But what's interesting is the following, right? And the second thing I did is, in this adventure, they have to buy cold weather gear because they're heading up to these frozen lands.
Yep.
So I the module just says like, if they don't have it, buy it. Well, so I created a little scene where they're at a merchant. They start the adventure together in front of this merchant buying their cold weather gear, and he states the price and then says, you don't want to buy for my brother, you want to buy for me. So now of course they bite and they go, well, who's the brother? And that's an opportunity for their characters to come out, right? Like if you're more lawful or more chaotic or, super about this, that, and the other, you care about commerce and like one person tried to steal a coat. That didn't go well. But so that kind of thing. And in fact, if
I was wearing this when I came in,
if there's a need for it, then I would add the sister, right? So there was 3 siblings. And so then the sister's over, the other brother goes like, well, don't buy for my sister. And they all have the same price, by the way. Right, 'cause that's the price in the adventures. I'm not going to change that. But it's just a way to create, right? Get them all talking and interacting with one another. Right. And so I look for that kind of thing. With monsters, I want to run them well. I want to do honor to the adventure writer who probably cooked these up for a reason. They should be cool and do their tricks. I want to make that happen. So I try to honor that by giving the players a good fight as the adventure intends. Sometimes it's an easy fight, but it's a cool fight, right? So I want to have that happen. And the biggest thing is pacing, right? So I want a D&D game to feel a little bit like a movie. And if you've watched the 2 shows that Community did, especially the second one,
right.
It's funny how they do it. They have the DM roll for everybody. Which then engages this narrative of like constantly telling players what's happening, but he does it so quickly, right? And so I try to do a little bit of that when I'm preparing, to think, how can I make this kind of be a cool pacing, feel fast and interesting and neat, and then know when to slow down and all right, let people explore or whatever, but then let's get back to the cool movie-like feel.
Yeah, on your discussion about role playing and kind of finding out what makes the characters tick. We had a DM at Winter Fantasy for one of the epics, and in my experience with organized play DMs, they often ask you for like the base stats of your guy, like what's your character's name, class, race, background, passive perception, passive insight, and sort of these other statistics. Which is funny because as a DM, I never pay any attention to any of that, so I don't know why people ask. The perception and insight I generally don't.
Yeah.
And I barely even acknowledge that there's other people at the table. So but one woman that we had that ran it, and she ran a really great game. And one of the things she said, like, what's your, give me an odd thing about your character. What's your character about? Like, tell me something unique about your character. Almost like 13th Age, right? What was the unique thing? And I was like, well, my character's wanted for a murder he may or may not have committed in Waterdeep, right? And she's like, she wrote that down. Boom. And she kind of did it for everybody. And this is for an epic, so everything was like super fast, super rigid, but she still asked that question. I don't know if they all got into play, but the fact that she kind of broke out of the basic, like, what's your passive perception and passive insight, and asks like, what's the one unique, I'm ripping off 13th Age here, and it wasn't quite what she asked, but what's the one unique thing of her character? We've hit the 30-minute mark, but there was one thing I wanted to do, which is I wanted you and I to compare our DM kits. When we're on the go and we're off at a shop, what are the things that we grab and that we have in our DM go bag?
Cool.
So I'll go first because I'm more interested in yours, and I'd like to end with yours. I have my big plastic folder that I carry around. It's pretty lightweight. It fits into a backpack. And this is what I take when I go to my Sunday organized play game at my local game shop. And I usually keep one of these for every campaign I'm running. So if I have 2 ongoing games, I have another one for the other one.
And so what's in that? Notes?
So all kinds of stuff. I'll go through it real quick.
Okay.
So I've got, my dice from Easy Roller Dice, a Slyflourish sponsor. These are really nice metal dice. This is probably my #1 favorite tool. This is the Paizo Flip Mat. And the funny thing is I rarely use it for gridded combat. I just like to have a whiteboard in front of me that I can write on. And what I like about this one is it folds up super lightweight, and you can write on it with dry erase. I've got like character miniatures for PCs that I keep a lot of Ziploc bags because they collapse easy. Pens and pencils and dry erase markers. So this is kind of neat, and I think you saw this when I was out there. So this doesn't look like much, right? but this is about 200 miniatures from a place called Flat Plastic Miniatures. Arknight Games is the company that makes them, the group that makes them. They had a Kickstarter. And what it is, in this one, it's a business card holder that I opened up. And I can't really, if I turn it, they're all going to fall. But it's about 8 sections, and each section has a different type of mini. And these are super flat miniatures. Let's see if that right. That doesn't look like anything at all. But they're all super lightweight, and they have stands, so they stand up like a regular miniature, and they work really well. And again, it's like perfect for a go bag. I mean, I think like me, and given the array of dragons you have behind you, we have a lot of minis. In fact, I know you're a big mini collector, right? Yeah. So it's kind of nice, but it's hard to carry all those minis around everywhere you go. I presume when you're prepping a game, do you go and dig out all the minis that fit that game, or?
Yeah, in fact, it's too bad I can't carry this camera around. I'd show everybody what I use, but I bought recently. I totally changed up my thing, so I have now a set of cabinets, plastic cabinets with drawers that I put everything into by type, and it's as tall as I am, and then I have a bunch of things like this. And this is actually from my DM kit. So I will use one of these, and sometimes a smaller one. So this I'll often do when I'm going to a convention and I'm running 3 or 4 adventures. This will be a combination of player minis. So if nobody has a mini, they can choose from it. And that's a lot of what if you can see any of them in here, that's what that is. And then I'll have some tokeny type things, indicators for a zone and stuff like that. There's a thing that can be used as a torch, who's carrying the torch, which comes from Litco. That's awesome. Right. And then I'll have the actual monsters. Now, with some adventures, you've got to go big or go home. So like this last one that I was running, I had to have this super tiny monster.
Oh, look at that.
And so that's just in a bag. And of course, then one of my favorites, we had some of these guys going on, right? So these are too big to fit in any container that I want to carry, like to Winter Fantasy where I'm flying, right? So it's just a plastic bag that could easily, be carried.
Just hope they don't end up in pieces.
No, they didn't, even though the new ones, the WizKid ones, can break a bit. They were fine. And the bag actually just lets me fold it around the clothing, and then I just have a bag for each adventure. So when I was done running an adventure, and I was only running 2 of them, several times each. Yeah. And then when I was done with one adventure, I just that stays in the hotel room in my luggage. So the other things I have, so this is always very critical, the table tents.
Yeah, I didn't get to show those, but you showed me these, right? Like number. I think they have numbers on them. There they go. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You were the one that showed me that, and I think it was at the convention where we played Keeping the Borderlands. And I was using another initiative card system that I didn't like nearly as much, and I'm like, this is perfect. Just throw the numbers around the table. Everybody can see what the people's initiative are, and it costs 40 cents.
The same genius who came up with Boshik of Asmecadome came up with that system, and we would use it because in Living Greyhawk you'd play these interactive events that are super awesome, and really you wanted to be ready to go, right? So we would do them when a DM was running an adventure for us. We would deploy those so we knew when to go, so that we were on point, right? So it wasn't like, well, whose turn is it? And I think we played the Epic, right? And one time a player skipped one of us. We go, wait a minute, that's not right. Oh yeah, you're right.
What else
the other
is in the kit?
So, this is a very non-sexy folder, but it has the DM rewards. So Adventures League lets you cross things off when you do various things.
My guys are so OP because of those rewards.
They're kind of broken. And then, of course, you got to bring your own characters because, DM's got to play too, and sometimes that happens. And then I never use them, but I do have some shortcut cheat sheet things and lookups and stuff. But I honestly, if I can't make it up, what's the point in looking something up? But I do bring those around. For battle maps, I'll bring a Chessex battle map, just one of those old vinyl tubes. It folds in luggage even, or it can even wrap around a backpack and strap on very lightly. And then you just use, wet erase pens. I'm perfectly happy with those and drawing on it. If I'm doing things at home, organized play at home, then I'll go more theatrical. I've got wooden blocks to prop things up. I've got all kinds of terrain I own that I use, Dwarven Forge, all sorts of stuff. So depending on the portability, I'll do that. I've run enormous castles for cool organized play things at stores that are local, but it just varies on what I'm doing. But that's the basic kit.
Yeah, the one last thing I'll share is the cheat sheet that Eric Nowak designed as part of my Fantastic Locations Kickstarter. Which what I like about it is, so it's got all the information. It basically has everything that's on the DM screen, but in like a 4-inch section in abbreviated terms, but just enough that I go, oh, what's blind again? Oh, blind is attack against advantage. Attacks are at disadvantage.
Nice.
It also has a bunch of random names on it because I suck generating names. But the other important part is that I can write down, it's a piece of paper, right? And I can carry a few of these, and I'll write down all of the characters and all the players and little bits about them, that same stuff that we talked about, including what's their motivation, what's their goal, what do they do? And what I like about it is it becomes an artifact that I keep. So like I can look back a few years and go, oh, that was that game with that one funny character, and I can pull out the sheet and kind of remember it. So I really
I do something like that during the game where I'll write the name of each. So, if usually you're at a round table, whatever the shape of the table is, on a piece of paper, I will write down each character name and something I want to know about them. Just scribble very quickly. It might be faction if faction matters, things like that. And then I will feed off of that during the adventure. I don't keep the notes like you do, but I it's a good way to track it. One thing also that I didn't mention but is really good is to give people index cards to write their character name on it, so they will call each other in in character. That's really big. Then a dice bag with lots of dice, because you have to check out my my flump for that.
Oh, look at that!
He made, and double clicks, support their new album. So lots of dice. It doesn't matter at Winter Fantasy, where it's almost entirely hardcore people.
Right.
But at Origins, at PAX, there are so many. I think half of my tables
sat down to play. Right?
Nobody has dice, right? Like it's really kind of funny.
Yeah, people, no pencils, no dice, no characters. The other thing I carry is I have a full set of the pre-gens from Phandelver. Because they go from level 1 to 5, so I can play a range, and if anybody, and they're AL legal, I think. So if anybody wants to play, you can just, here you go. Here's your, you want a level 2 cleric, you got a level 2 cleric. You're good to go.
And on the Going Last website, I posted on their site. They have pre-gens or table tents for character tents for all of those pre-gens.
Cool.
With a space for your name. It has like a picture of both male and female, and then a space for the name that's for each of those classes that comes in that starter kit, because I found that I wanted to make those for players who would show up, right, and be like, all right, here's, you are this cool dwarf.
Yeah, right. Really brings them in, especially if it's their first time. So I totally failed on my duty of stopping at the half hour to have a half hour of questions, but we will press on. Alex, do you have questions from our fine audience?
Yes, I have. Hello? Do you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, we got some questions from the chat. Thanks everyone for asking.
Awesome.
So I'll try to get to as many as we can. Here's the first from MJS October. How can we encourage our friendly local gaming stores to support Adventurers League? Where I live in Canada, none of the local stores have any Adventure League's games, and they don't seem interested.
So a couple things. One is gaming stores have a program called the WPN, this Windows Play Network, and they get points for running Magic the Gathering and other things. And that includes D&D organized play. So when they run organized play, they get points towards that system, which makes them a premier store, which lets them sell books earlier and beat out Amazon, right? So Volo shows up there first, and there can even be the special, print version that you can get, and so they're incentivized. They also have things like the adventure in Volo's Wake, which was a special adventure now available in the DM's Guild, was sent to them early, which can be, all these things can be draws for the store. So one thing is kind of just explain those. Also take a look at the Adventurers League website that I was talking about before earlier, where people like Lauren Blanco are talking about why you want to do this as a store, why it's worthwhile. But a big part that I do, because I would often travel for work and start up, games at stores that weren't doing anything. And I would just go and say, hey, look, like I'm looking to, find a point in time when you've got space in your store. You give me one table. I'm going to help you recruit people. We'll put up signs. We'll get people into your store, and we'll encourage them to be a part of the store. So, and you can do that a number of ways. Like one of them that's really simple is saying, when someone sits down to play, they either have to pay the store some amount, real money, Canadian dollars, or they can purchase something, and then they don't have to pay, right? If it's worth at least that amount. So that people are customers, because when Magic the Gathering, when you sit down to play Magic, you pay.
Yeah, every time. Shelling out a fair amount too.
Everybody's used to that, and it's great for a store, right? So this lets the D&D side kind of share in on that. So those are kind of different approaches, but again, just work with the store, explain to them. There's also, through the Ambassadors program of the Heralds Guild, there are now groups that can help you in your region to coordinate support for stores and talk to stores. That's being set up now.
Yeah, my experience has been that some stores are very active, and mostly it's whoever's running the shop, right? If they love D&D, then they're really active to help D&D, and if they're not, then they'll be like, sure, you can have a table, if you want to sit in the back and play. And then so I've seen different ranges. I don't think I've seen any that are like screw you, there's no D&D to our place. But yeah, I think the sort of unwritten, it's probably written and spoken, is that Magic is where the money's coming from.
Sure.
And we RPG people just aren't, we're just, I buy all of the D&D books that come out at my FLGS, and that's like $150 a year or something like that. It's really not a lot for, weekly, get 52 games for 4 hours each. So that's to keep in mind. The other thing is there are people who want to play organized play. Either they don't have an FLGS, either it's not friendly or it's not there at all. And again, if they want to get involved in organized play, I think looking into it on something like Roll20. I know a lot of people would prefer to play at a table with real people.
So, but you can also, any public location will do. So you can, or any publicly invited thing will fulfill the public side of things. But you can even play at home, right? So you can run at home. You can run at a bookstore, at a coffee shop. You can run at your school, at a library. You name it. There are lots of ways to do it. And so if your stores aren't biting, you could find some other place, right? Find a coffee shop. I know someone, I forget where they are, but they run a coffee shop / gaming store. He says it's hilarious to watch people have several espressos while playing D&D.
Critical hits!
Good luck. It can take time. I remember one time in Houston, it took me 2 solid months to build up a group, but then that group ran for years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, in general, even stepping outside of organized play, a philosophy that I've had is by far the hardest part of D&D is getting a group to sit down at a table and play. Like, if you could do that, the rest of all this other nonsense that we always talk about rules and about, the balance of encounters and all this stuff is nonsense compared to how do I just get, and for people, for me, it's never hard to find a DM, but, for people who don't want a DM, finding a DM, finding a group is by far the hardest part, and it's gotten better. I'm not even sure, but it's always a tough problem.
The other thing I'd say is if you play, if your goal is to play, be prepared that you have to do some work. Like, if everybody wants to play, well, that's not going to work out, right? So if you're the one who's motivated and interested, then you've got to lead and set the example. Run a really nice, good, clean program at a store. And hey, while you're at it, recruit people. So back with the first season of organized play in stores of D&D, and what was then D&D Encounters, I was running this adventure, and there were 2 guys at my table who were just super awesome. Like, they were, my Minotaur rushes forward, and so at the end of it, I'm like, would you guys like to DM? I think it was like their second time playing D&D, and they're like, yeah, how do I DM? And we're like, all right, let's get you started. And those guys went on to actually DM for D&D people at a convention. It was hilarious. Like, they were like, we're doing everything, but that's how it can work, right? You just identify those people who are motivated at your table and say, hey, you guys take a turn.
Right. Hey, Alex, what are the questions you got?
Oh no, Calden wants to know, how has being an organized play player and dungeon master helped you with your game design?
Oh, good question.
Tons, because what you get to see is, and a lot of times an adventure is a variation on a theme, right? So like jungle exploration or a trek through the wilderness, and we might go like, how do I make a trek through the wilderness interesting? And then you're running an adventure, you go, oh, wow, that was really cool. I'm going to be ripping that off. I'm going to feed off of that. I'm going to take these ideas and add my own twist to it. Where do you place a trap in a room to create a certain type of situation? There's just countless ways that in organized play, you learn these kinds of lessons. And like I was saying before, right, that's the most creative thing, is seeing how these masters of the game have done things. One of my favorites is a guy I really like named Steve Pierce. He used to say, a great D&D adventure, not a good, but a great D&D adventure, teaches you something about your character. Mm-hmm. Right? This is for you, the player. And I was kind of thinking about it, I was like, all right, yeah. Like when I think of my favorite adventures, they're ones where like I kind of had to go out and take a stand on something, right? And there was a great adventure once that had kind of these three choices of what do you do with these bound souls that have been protecting this kingdom. Do you just free them? Do you launch them at the enemy and then they're going to die? Right? They don't get to be freed. Do you keep them here because they protect our southern border? Like, what do you do, right? And we all started having these in-character, really visceral reactions around what to do. And so then I was like, all right, whenever it comes to make choices, like I'm going to be thinking about this encounter and how to play off of that, whether it's a home campaign or my own writing. A lot of what I do comes off from those experiences in organized play and my desire to feed off of those cool experiences I've had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say some of I've only written a few organized play adventures, and in some cases I'm not I always like to kind of look at something and say, well, this idea came from that. I'm not sure it's a great idea. It kind of works sometimes, but I'm willing to throw it away if it turns out it's not very good. And that was sort of an adventure template, and this is from playing adventures. I kind of saw what's the pace that seems to work right for a 4-hour game among organized play people, and it was like the faster you can get to that first battle, the better. So it's like, and the problem is, it's like you're almost always going to get jumped in one of my adventures, right? Like it's almost always the first thing that happens is like, oh my god, we're in a fight. And the thing is, like, I just like to wake people up, right? Like I've seen too many adventures where it's like 20 minutes of narrative and then a little bit of role playing, and players are just like, sitting back and surfing their phones. And it's like, if I could just get them like, oh my god, trolls, being attacked by trolls.
And that's the thing, right? Like investigation or narrative that are evocative, right? Yeah. There are people who have figured that out, and so you want to emulate those things so that the scenes are always cool. You're investigating and finding the lore is not boring, right? That's always a key.
Yeah. So like the Drowned Tower was one of the organized play ones I did for, I think, season 2 or season 3.
Season 2, Elemental, right?
A Mulmaster, right? And that template was, you get jumped, you talk to some folks, you do some investigations, you go to a dungeon, and then it's like you fight a bunch of monsters in the dungeon, you fight a boss, and that structure, worked. I've now built so many adventures using the same general structure, and I like it because it kind of has all the D&D stuff in it, right? It's got your fights, it's got boss fights, it's got exploration, it's got role playing opportunities, it's got a dungeon, and it all sort of works. But I also think that sometimes I'm binding myself too closely to that template, and that it lacks creativity.
So you can always change it up. It's just a risk, kind of like you were saying, right? Like it might fail. So one of the things that I've done a lot, probably the last 2 years, is my adventures have been more departures from that, and tended to be very complicated and required a lot out of the DM. When run well, they were, I think, really cool, right? Mm-hmm. And so people who loved them really loved them. But I knew designing them that some people would go, this is a lot. I want to just, I had to run it cold or something like that. Then it's going to be hard for those folks. But that was my decision to kind of break out of the mold and do something very unusual that would require this work from the DM. But in exchange for hopefully a very, like a sort of unique experience, right? So there's always that cost when you move away from, say, the 3-act structure, right? Or those kinds of the typical beats that an adventure has. Then you've got to think it through, and you got to know that it's not going to resonate sometimes, or will even fail sometimes, and that's okay. That's worth doing, I think.
Alex, what else you got?
All right, so here's one from Ludatus. How do you?
Oh no! Oh, it's about Vorpal swords.
No, it's about loot. How do you feel about Dungeon Masters earning loot for their Adventurers League characters?
Oh, that's actually a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked I got a good question from him. Almost always it's about Vorpal Swords. He's he's a player in my Wednesday game, by the way. Good friend.
I think overall it's a good call, right? I think that it's generally, I think the DM rewards that we have, and especially the ones that give loot, are coveted by players, and certainly are strong incentives for you to be DMing. Same thing with the leveling up a character, right? People who DM a lot for Adventures League, in case you don't know, can check off these boxes and various accomplishments, and they can cash in a bunch of experience points to level a character. So like, Mike was playing a character at a convention that he basically fabricated from a low level because he had all these rewards. And it's a cool way to say, hey, you DM a ton, here's your benefit, right? Or I have a character that could choose an item from anything I've ever run. So out of all the things I've run, I could choose an item for their tier, and they have it. And it's awesome, right? It is a bit too strong, but I guess I can live with it. So it's both things. If it were up to me, I'd probably tone it down a bit, but I'm not complaining loudly over it because, again, I think it's a super good incentive to say, hey, DMs, keep DMing, right?
Yeah,
and feel good and special.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time there wasn't any loot, right? Like you got experience, and it was not a lot of experience for DMing stuff. And then I think when they started doing the DM rewards, it kind of went from famine to feast. And I didn't even pay attention to it. And then right before Winter Fantasy, I'm like, I ought to tally up all the adventures I ran. And I'm like, I can make a level 10 character with like a rare item, and an uncommon item that's from scratch.
Yeah.
Should I really be able to play tier 3 with any magic item that I ran? And so like I had a character that you saw, my war cleric. And the thing is, like, I felt like the war cleric is already pretty underpowered compared to like light cleric and storm cleric. But when I was able to give him a belt of hill giant strength, right, from an adventure I ran a while ago, now he's actually pretty effective, because now his wisdom and strength are both pretty high. And I was like, should I, that doesn't feel right. Like, the fact that I could pick a belt, it'd be one thing if I got like a +1 item, or a +1 suit. And it's something else when it's like, no, I got this giant list of, loot that I can pick. So, the AL people spend far more time thinking about this kind of stuff than I do. They'll figure it out as far as I'm concerned. In the meantime, I'm just happy to keep playing.
Yep. And I've pushed in the past, and when we didn't have those programs, I was one of the people pushing for better rewards for judges. Like, I mean, in Living Greyhawk, if you ran an adventure, you couldn't play it. It was sort of the reverse of incentive. It was sort of a de-incentive, right?
Yeah, right.
And other organized play campaigns like Living Spycraft have experimented with benefits, and now Adventures League, and I think that's the right thing to do. One thing that's constant in organized play is change. So whatever you're seeing now, it'll be tweaked, it'll be refined. It always changes over time.
Mm-hmm. Alex, what else you got?
All right. So from MJS October, how many new players are you seeing compared to experienced players?
That's a good question.
Really varies by convention and by store, the kind of program that's going on. So at when I'm, like I think I said kind of earlier, like at Origins and PAX, half the people can be new. In fact, at PAX, it can be everybody that's new, or everybody is new, or like a returning player that's like, I played 2E and I want to get back in. That's very common at PAX because it's a video game type convention, and so people are kind of like, what I want to do is I want to try this for the first time here with my spouse, that kind of thing. But then at Winter Fantasy, everybody's old hat. So it depends by the convention. Gaming stores can have a lot of changeover, and that blew my mind when I first started with that. So when I ran I organized for our store the later half of the first season, and I think the second season, the Dark Sun season. And during that time, I came in with the expectation that I knew every player in Portland, which is dumb, but I was just so used to seeing the same crew at these Living Greyhawk games and early Living Forgotten Realms games that I just assumed that because I saw the same people all the time, that's who it was. And I only had 3 people during this time period that I knew show up, that I knew, as Forgotten Realm organized play people. And I had over 350 unique players during that time span, right? which is, I didn't know there are that many players. I wouldn't have guessed there are that many active D&D players in Portland. Like, that blew my mind. So there are tons, right? Oh, the other thing that's worth mentioning is that's 1 out of 7 stores running in the Portland area. So you can imagine how many people are actually playing that are new or casual or, you know, just coming in and out of the game. There's a ton.
Yeah, yeah, I don't. I think my circles are small enough that I tend not to see. I see new players that play D&D. Usually, I have like coworkers and stuff like that. It was amazing, right? We had a white elephant Christmas gift exchange, and I brought a D&D starter kit, which I bring every year. And everybody knows it's me because I'm pretty loud about my hobby at work. And it got passed around a lot. Like, people kept stealing it from everyone else. I'm like, man, I'd have brought 4 of these. Like, you know, I'd have brought extras.
Yeah.
Everybody who wants one will get one. I will buy it. Right. I'll pay for it.
Awesome.
And and it was a bunch of people that had never played before, but, you know, had seen it or heard about it or heard me talking about it or something. And it's, you know, middle-aged folks and young folks and a bunch of different folks. So, at the organized play here in Northern Virginia, I tend to see a lot of the same folks play, and they've, you know, like my group is an organized play group, but it's the same 6 players, you know, and has been for a long time. So, but a few of those were new, you know, had new players when they started. Alex, what else you got?
All right, so Rudy keeps bugging me to ask this. Vault of the Dracolich is so great. Can you make another?
Can we make another? We probably could.
Yeah. we would love to. It's really, honestly, if not my favorite project, it's definitely up there because we had such a good synergy. We would have, you know, between the 3 of us, the Scott of Gray, we would like have these meetings and it'd be like great ideas. And then Mike would, whatever we said, Mike would do it that night, which was always unbelievable. And I would be almost as punctual.
I am a procrastinator, but I do all my procrastination up front. That's my shtick, right? I start procrastinating the day I get a project, and that was putting that together, and that was sort of an experiment for WotC. And I don't know if they kept doing that. Did they do that with you with other projects, Teos?
I think Candlekeep was a similar situation. They aren't doing a whole lot of that kind of work, though I will say that with the D&D Open, it was similar, right? So I wrote last year's D&D Open. I don't think it's been announced who's working on this year's. But with last year's D&D Open, it was Sean Merwin and Sean Molly and myself. And we did a bit of that. We didn't quite have the, you know, weekly conference call organization that I think worked really well. But we do have, you know, we'd have the phone calls, we'd have the Dropbox working, and that was, really good stuff. Really good way to create. Super fun when you hit a nice rhythm like that. It would be really fun to do that again for Wizards.
Yeah, and this is one where, you know, like I tend to not work on projects that same way. And I work on projects with other people, but a lot of times we're all kind of at different stages working in series rather than working all together in parallel. Although Scott Gray and I now work together all the time. Like Scott and I both worked on Fantastic Locations together. We're working on my new project together. He had a very fun moment.
What's that called again?
Fantastic Adventures.
No, the new project.
That is the new project.
Oh, it is Fantastic Adventures.
Slyflourish's Fantastic Adventures. Yeah,
and
it will soon be a thing.
Awesome.
It is on its way to a thing. Yeah, it's short 2-hour-ish adventures built around locations and intended to be like, you know, my question is, why don't we have a full book of Fandelvers? Right, I love Fandelver. Why don't we have a whole bunch of those? And I want to so I'm making a bunch of those. It's also a totally different kind of adventure design than the typical thing. So we'll see. You will see it, my friend.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you will see it early because I need the advice. Anyway, so Scott and I have Scott. There was a funny situation where actually I emailed Scott saying, "Hey, I've got this thing and I'd really like your help on it. Can you help me out?" And he says, "Well, I'm busy with another project right now." "Oh, that's for you too." And it was something I sent to Wizards of the Coast that they sent to him. So I was like, God, I can't get away from you. But that, so that, you know, when you and I and Scott worked on that and having those sort of weekly meetings where we talked about it. And one thing that you taught me in that really was profound, because I tend to just want to boil everything down all the time. You know, I told you about my adventure outline where it's like, look, it's fight, explore, fight, talk to people, investigate stuff, dungeon, fight, boss, right? Like that's, you know. and I always trying to like simplify things down and keep it to, you know, boil it down. And you really brought this idea of like, no, things need to be complicated. Like they're not, you know, it's not fun if it's, you know, everybody knows what it is, and if they can figure it out with one skill check. It needs to be deeper, you know, needs to have layers to it. And I was like, you know, yeah, that's right, you know. So that was and we did that. I remember, in fact, figuring out how the hell that last fight worked in Vault, because I kept wanting to like, no, we got to reduce it down to like destroy a crystal. You destroy a crystal and everything's fine. And you're like, no, it can't be that way. Or like how the Dracolich shows up, right? I just wanted to sort of warp in and breathe and then warp away. And it's like, no, he's got to be a real Dracolich. So that was great. One of my proudest moments was getting the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide and opening the back and seeing the map in there from Vault of the Dracolich as one of their example maps. And I was like, I remember when that, like, I sketched out that piece of shit on a whiteboard, and I have it. And it's like the ugliest map on earth. And I'm like, but if you hold them side by side, you can kind of see that it's there. Yeah, and Scott Gray was the one. Yeah, Scott Gray was the one who actually took my shitty whiteboard version. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, yeah, it's so great. And he took my shitty whiteboard version and turned it into one that like was actually something we could send to Wizards to be like, you know, Mike Shea needs to put this together.
Yeah, I had something similar with have this around. This is from Candlekeep.
Oh yeah, look at that.
And you should see because you're like a Michelangelo compared to what I do when I draw on pieces of paper to show people what I want an adventure to happen. And no, but that's how bad I am. And so I feel bad when I hand them things in, but then like this amazing stuff comes out, and it's like,
when you get a pro map artist, they're amazing, you know. And that was great. Do we want to? Do you have time for one more question? All right, Alex.
All right,
one last question.
Here's one from Johnny Utah 99. It's, what do I do if I have 2 or more player characters in my group begin fighting each other? How do you guys deal with that?
What do you do, Teos?
Well, so there's a rule in organized play, which is a good rule, that you cannot do that unless the other person says yes.
It's like an MMO. You have to both flag up.
Right. So like, for example, if you're casting Fireball, right, is the typical thing that this would happen in 3rd edition organized play, where someone would say like, I'm going to put Fireball, or actually it happened earlier too. I'm going to put Fireball, and I'm sorry you're in it, you know, but it's worth it. And the character might go like, it's not worth it, I might die. And you're like, well, sorry, that's what my character does. Right. And that would create really bad feelings at the table for obvious reasons, particularly when you die. So, you know, it was an unofficial rule. Now it's an official rule that you have to get permission. So anything that would cause harm to another character, you need to bless it. The character that's being impacted needs to bless it.
That's a good idea.
So in theory, they cannot fight each other unless they both want to fight each other. If they both want to fight each other and nobody else wants to see that happen, then I would say you want to take the players aside and kind of say like, hey, you know, I can give you a spotlight, right? Like I could create an arena scene or something like that where you guys get to do this with some, you know, fictitious rules or whatever that'll make this work to give you, if this is something fun for you. But I want you to be aware that, you know, it's not fun in the same way for all the other players, and it's not something we want to see happen week after week, because it will drag down play for everybody else. And I would be open about it with them. So I always find that it's better to, like in love and relationships and family matters and anything, the more that you can be upfront and explain how people feel, the better it is. And if you need to, you know, maybe like after a session ends, talk to some of the other players, you know, make sure they're on your side. But yeah, if you have that feeling that only these 2 people are enjoying it, then I would say to them, you know, that's not what we're looking for. And then kind of, you know, what are you after? What are you missing, right? That's causing this behavior? Is there some way I can make the game more appealing that won't involve this and drag away? Because you guys are spotlighting this stuff over here that nobody wants to be a part of. I wouldn't say those words, but you know, that's what's happening, right? They're doing a thing over here that detracts from the adventure that you're trying to run, your experience as a DM, from what the other players want to do. So what is it you want out of the game? And maybe there's a way I can give that to you. that isn't this, because this is not good.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that there are a few situations. I tend to try to like stay in game and in character as much as I can, but there are a few situations where it's really worth stepping outside of stepping out of character and having conversations. And often, if one has the chance, doing it before anything's even started, like doing it before people have really made characters. Do it before if you're running sort of a campaign. Harder to do with organized play, where everybody sits down at the table, drops their tickets, and everyone starts going.
Yeah.
But and somebody I just saw mentioned in the chat, which is saying to everybody, like, your character needs to have a solid reason to be working with all the other characters, right? Like, yeah. I had a player at an organized play game at a game shop, and younger guy, and I don't think had played a lot of D&D, who's like, I don't know why my character's with you guys, like, he's gonna go off and do this other thing, and I had to stop the game and say, your character need and it took like a few back and forth. So I was like, your character needs to have a reason to work with the rest of the group. He's like, well, my character doesn't. And I'm like, you're not hearing me. Yeah. I don't care what you think your character has. It's up to you to kind of wire your character in so that, you're being popular with the group.
One thing I do with that situation, it could maybe work in this fighting thing too, is so I run a kids game, and I encourage you, if you can, to run a kids game, because it is hilarious how they operate, and it does teach you new skills that apply to troublemakers. They're
often way more creative.
Oh, they are. But so I could tell so many stories, but one of them was, there was like some guys ran away, and it was, to any player that I think knows, gets it, has some experience, they're gone, right? But she insisted on my character's going to follow them. So I was like, okay. And, the other players know she's prone to these kinds of things. So they said, no, don't do that. Come on, don't do this. And I said, no, it's fine. She runs off after them. And they're like, and I said, but back here. And then we went right back to what we were doing, right? So she just exited the scene. Mm-hmm. And then at the very end, when we were done with everything, I said, you finally come back, and here's what you tell the party. Mm-hmm. Right? You saw, and make me 2 checks. Okay, here's what you caught. You caught the fact that they had an emblem on their cloak, and you heard something about this, and that's all. Like 2 little minor clues. And there was no special scene for you. You don't get to have your own mini adventure or anything like that. I just give you a little summary of what you did. And the trade-off was you didn't participate in all this other cool stuff that happened at the scene that you ran out of. So same thing with these guys fighting. If what they're doing is detracting from the current scene, you can say, like, all right, you guys are too distracted by your fight to do this scene. So, if you guys want to go over to an empty table and fight out, you can do that or whatever. I'll just summarize and come up with it. Mm-hmm. And you can perhaps handle it that way, to kind of be like, this happens off screen, guys, or let's assume you have a great fight. Do you guys want to just roll d20s to see who wins? Like, we don't have time for the whole fight, but what do you want to?
We're not all going to sit here watching you roll attacks.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to go on with the plot. You can either be off camera or just quickly summarize what happens to all of us, and then we continue on, because it's not what the adventure is.
Right. Have you seen? I'm going to hijack the question a little bit. Have you seen situations where sort of the goals and motivations of the characters aren't really in great alignment in an organized play game, where there's not really much of a chance to address it until all of a sudden it happens? And the example I'll give is like a Zent character who's lawful evil is more than happy to assassinate the barge guy when everybody else is like, wait a minute, we need that barge guy. How do you handle that?
The one thing I'll do is I'll freeze time. So they'll say, like, I kill him, and I say, all right, so you are clearly, everybody can see that your character is about to kill this person. Everybody has a chance to stop this. I'll just say that. Mm-hmm. Right? Everybody has a chance to stop this. What would you all want to do? And make it clear, like, you're the singular. All of the plural now gets to choose what you want to do. And someone might say, well, I try to talk you out of it, or, I'll put my shield in between. And I will always rule in the favor of that plurality rather than the one singular player that wants to hijack the thing. Now, if something's inappropriate, then I'll say, we're not going to go there, right? Torch or anything like that. We're going to take that out of there. Anything with a trigger warning, I'll stop it immediately and be more forceful about it. But otherwise, that's a thing I'll do, is I'll freeze time when trouble is going to happen, and I'll allow everybody else a chance to pause and stop it. There was a really funny one in one of the adventures that I wrote that I was running, and this is another fun thing about organized plays. You get to see what people do with your adventures that you think you've figured it out. And the bad guy at the end greets this party and says, and the idea is very obvious: you are now going to fight this person, right? And you come back to the meeting with him to take him out, and he knows this as well. And so he says, "So, you've learned a lot inside, haven't you?" And they go, "Yeah, here's the thing you wanted." And he's like, so they're like, "Yeah, you can have it." Like, so we're okay with this. And so I say, everybody can tell he's incredibly surprised. You can see he expected a fight. How do the rest of you feel about what this person is wanting to do? And they're like, "Yeah, I guess we're okay with that." So there was, so I kind of had another thing show up. So there was a little bit of a fight, but I mean, I reward them with the fact that, they avoided it, and we all had a good laugh about it, but that's the way it was.
Yeah, that happens. Well, we've gone over a little bit. I always try to keep these things down to an hour, but I love this conversation and us digging through our bags. I want to make sure people got their questions answered. So I really appreciate you coming on the deep dive. I hope we can do this again.
Awesome.
And,
I'd love to. Always fun.
Alex, I want to thank you for all the hard work wrangling the chat channel and getting all those questions for us. That was really great.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
And to the audience who watched, thank you very much. And to those of you watching on YouTube or listening to any podcast, thank you very much as well. And I want to thank to my friends, Rudy Basso, Alex Basso, of course, and Rudy Basso and James Sindercasso, who give us the network to host all of this stuff and all the hard work we're about to do. Yeah, right. Plays an awesome Kenku. God, that was fun. And all the hard work that's about to take place to edit my choppy voice into something beautiful. Yep. So thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.